Hey, John, I'm so glad to be talking with you today. In our conversations, we both realized we're talking to a lot of empty nesters, and so we just decided to record a video that's hopefully helpful to people.
Yeah, a lot of people are moving to the area because they want to be near their kids and they're trying to figure out, well, what does that look like? So we're here to talk to you today a little bit about this. As your kids have moved out, maybe you notice that all of a sudden your HVAC decides to die because you know what? It got the message your kids are gone and we want to give you another expense. But obviously that's not the only variable. And people are trying to figure out where they're going to be as they look ahead for the next few years, especially as their children are far away.
Yeah, and as the data nerd, I couldn't help but start this conversation with some information and just share with people that people are moving here, and it's projected to increase 9% or more. And not only that, but from 2020 to 2023, 52% of the people who moved here were 55 or older.
Yeah, it's shocking at the growth that we've seen here. And as you said, people who are a little bit older to be near their families. So as you begin to think through this big move, you've got to establish some sort of criteria in order to help you make some of the decisions about where you want to be exactly in the triangle area. So first of all, let's start off with lifestyle. What do you want? How do you want to live? Do you want to be in an urban downtown setting, in a semi-urban setting, or do you really maybe you want to be on the very edge of the triangle out in a more rural or completely suburban setting?
Absolutely. And it's something that they should talk about with their partner. So talking together, looking at density, looking at activity, what is loud, what is not loud, where are your tolerant levels for the type of boisterous stuff if you do want to move to a more urban area or more bustling area. So it's all relative to where you live now. Maybe you live in the city now and you want to get the heck out of Dodge. So I think it's important to really talk about what is big, what is small. What do all those words mean to you and your spouse? Because you might have completely two different visions of the future.
Right. Another big factor to be considering is your physical needs. You're probably going to want to be thinking about living all on one level. You want to have access possibly to some public transportation, or maybe not. Maybe you want to keep your car and that's fine for you. I think that proximity to services or a hospital are going to be important variables in people's decision making.
Lots of people are super healthy right now. But again, a lot of people that I talk to are trying to think 15, 20 years, 10, 15 years down the way, or at least have an option. You know, if you're fine walking up and downstairs and you like it and it keeps you young, sure, there's some bedroom on the first floor. I think you can decide, again, talk with your spouse, partner, whoever, where is your priority list on transportation, on stairs? You know, where does this fall? Is that important to both of you or not? So it's all about communication.
Well, let's talk about social energy. That's a huge variable. It kind of ties in with lifestyle criteria. You know, do you want a situation where social activity is structured for you? Or are you an extrovert person who's going to go out and create your own social structure? I think that's particularly true with people who might find it a little bit more difficult. And they might be apprehensive. I'm going to be moving my age children. I'm not going to have any friends.
Right.
Well, we all can make new friends. And so do you need a little assistance by having a built-in social system to help promote those relationships? Or are you going to be able to sort of do that on your own? All right. Financial picture. Well, we can't ever forget that everybody has a different financial story. And so if you want to be in a more urban environment, you might be paying a premium. You might have a little cost of living premium. So that's something to factor. If you need potential renovation costs, that's going to be something you might be considering too. So each of the various options, which we'll be exploring later, have potential variability in terms of the cost. All right. So emotional attachment. Wow, Hilary.
This is the hardest one. This is the hardest one.
I think, you've raised your whole thing in your home and now you're moving because you want to be near your family, but spaces have memories and things in those spaces have memories. And so it's very hard to sometimes let go of those attachments. And so acknowledging that up front perhaps makes it a bit easier. It's more important to be near the people than to be near the things. Something to be considering.
I think a lot of people have that in their head and they just have to go through the process because a lot of the feedback that we get on our listings from this demographic is storage. Hey, we love the area, but the storage, where do I put the things? And so that is probably the hardest for a lot of people. The last thing I think that's important to consider is future flexibility. And we do have some more options at the end, but let's talk about, what if you do want to go to Italy for 3 weeks?
I think that's a great point. Could you Airbnb your home? Maybe help fund the trip to Italy? Or do you want to be able to sell your property because maybe a health issue comes up and you need to be able to, dispose of this asset in order to move into another type of housing situation? So these are all important considerations.
Absolutely. Especially the rental. You need to understand what the rules are. Even for single family homes, cities can, whether or not you're in Raleigh or not, you could be in a different city in our area. They do have different rules on short-term rentals.
Right. So, Hilary, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, you're probably wondering, who the heck am I talking to? Who are these people giving me advice? And so I just threw in a couple of bullets that might be relevant to this population. I am middle-aged. I've been doing this for 20 years. I thought it was worth pointing out. I have lived in bigger cities, even just for a year. Did live in San Francisco and Nashville. And I grew up here in North Carolina, which is kind of rare in this area. And I just wanted to point out that I practice what I preach. I think actions speak louder than words, and I'm doing what I do. I mean, I've bought and sold 6 houses. I've gutted one, and I own rental property. So I'm in the space where I'm giving advice. And I think that matters to a lot of people. So speaking of gutting a house, John, I know that you have also renovated your house.
Yeah, I too have gutted and rebuilt my own house. My background is as an architect, and I've been doing that for 30 plus years. I also have a construction company, and I've been doing that for 25 plus years. I grew up doing construction as a high schooler. And then I studied architecture and sort of a design build philosophy at Berkeley, so in different parts of the country as well. I got into real estate because I was often having these conversations with clients about whether to stay or to move. Occasionally it came up that, I think we're going to move as opposed to renovate. So I figured, I've already established a relationship with folks. Why don't I help them take the other option and look at properties and help them purchase those? So, I've experienced this empty nest phenomenon myself. My kids have moved out, and we're walking up into the second floor and trying to figure out what all the different light switches in the house did. Still have some questions about a couple of them.
I think that's hilarious.
That's a reality, we face. All of a sudden we have a lot more extra room, or the space isn't being used in any way. Just what's the impact of when your kids leave?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are experiencing that. So thank you for sharing. And we've got these 3 options: 55 plus community, sort of more urban, walkable in the city, and then new construction. And what I think we'll get to in the new construction is, you can talk about your own experience because you're in an old house. And I know you yourself are contemplating new construction. But first, let's jump into 55 plus, because that's kind of a prepackaged all-in-one done, right?
Right. And so some people prefer this. There are a lot of positives to 55 plus type community. It's all new construction. So everything is taken care of. You don't have to worry about that old house. All relatively new. It's usually got an incredible amount of amenities available for you. On top of the physical amenities, it's got this social structure that is being curated almost daily for everybody, so that, you don't have to wake up in the morning and say, what am I going to do? So what are some of the other benefits that you see, Hilary?
I think the new construction is 100% the main appeal, like you said. You're automatically going to have something in common with these people. You don't have to think. It's just programmed, and you're tired of planning, and you just want to enjoy yourself, right? And so everybody there is kind of there for the same reasons. You have a lot of the same values and, same hobbies, and it's just sort of that. It's truly plug and play. But let's also go through, I think a lot of people recognize that. But the one downside, as attractive as this is, I think what stops some people is that because they take up a lot of space in their new construction, they're typically further out of town. 30 minutes from, downtown Durham, downtown Raleigh, 20 minutes, depending on where you are. And people might not want to drive everywhere again.
Yeah, and I think also these communities are highly structured. On one hand, that's good. On the other hand, it might not be so good for some personalities. Some people rival the HOA to a military code of conduct. You don't want people telling you exactly what you can do with your home on the outside. Another thing is getting your kids to come visit and play around in the community is going to require some sort of national security clearance. There are no kids around, basically. And so for some folks, that's finally. And for other folks, it's like, no, I like the vibrancy of having my children around or having other kids around. Well, let's look at option 2. Urban living.
A lot of people that we talk to, a lot of people have lived in the burbs and they really are just tired of it because the burbs is associated with taxing the kids around and just being in the car all the time. I think people want that walkability. They're like, okay, I don't want to be in the car. I've traveled. And what I love about traveling is being in the center of everything. And that's the lifestyle. It goes back to lifestyle, right? That's what they want. Yep. And so then it becomes a matter of where and how much noise, right? Because in the city, there's always something happening. And that's why you want to live there, right? Is because there's so much activity. Exactly. You can sit on your front porch and meet your neighbors and walk down to the restaurant, or in the morning, go get coffee. Or as you're walking your dog, you stop and do things because it's just all right there. And so what it ends up being for us is really navigating the different neighborhoods, because the challenge is, we talked about with 55 plus, new construction. Everybody wants that new construction, but also in this old city. Guess what? The old city has old houses. And so it's such a conflict between wanting this lifestyle, but the inventory is old.
Well, I personally live downtown and I love it. And laughing about how, for people who've lived in the suburbs for a long time, they had to, the walk was to their mailbox and now the walk is to the restaurant, which, is a big deal. I love living downtown, but there's some cons. Sometimes I hear the trash truck at 4 a.m. in the morning because it's backing up and making a beeping sound. All that said, I personally would continue to choose this option. I love this option. I lived in it for a long time, and I like the vitality of it. Parking is always a problem. You can't really easily have a garage unless you've got a huge budget. I don't have a garage, but again, I've chosen this lifestyle. I prefer this lifestyle. I like the vitality of it that you mentioned, Hilary. All right, let's talk about new construction. All right.
Sorry.
Well, with the new construction, we have a couple of options available. There's the semi-custom homes, where builders are building up homes for, a lot of them are targeting empty nesters as well. You don't necessarily get to choose everything, but you could maybe choose your paint colors, maybe have some input on lighting fixtures and plumbing fixtures and tile, but you're getting kind of a prepackaged designed for the home. And you don't necessarily get to choose your mechanical or your window or the roof and all of that. And then, of course, that then leads into the truly custom built, where it's exactly designed for every detail that you ever wanted. You've been collecting images for the last 20 years, and you know exactly which HVAC system or which window you want. I got to have a metal roof, and it's got to be this particular metal gauge. But those are obviously different budgets. And then there's the remodel option. I'm just going to speak to a little bit for folks who aren't necessarily moving across the country or in a large geographical difference. There are going to be folks who are saying, maybe you should just stay in this house and remodel. That's an option. But that is also going to be shockingly expensive to you, because the remodel could easily cost more than whatever you paid for that house.
Yeah. And something that kind of blends the new construction and the urban and walkability is that we're seeing a lot of these vertical townhouses, sometimes needed as condos, with rooftop patios with an elevator. And so it's like you still have 4 levels of living, but the elevator is there for later. Or groceries, or heavy bags, So do you have any thoughts? Because we're seeing a lot of that in our area.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an incredibly important thing, because people think elevator, that's got to be hugely expensive. It's actually surprisingly inexpensive. And especially if you're choosing to be in an urban environment where you want the ability to have access to the vitality of urban living, but you can't have the horizontal space to spread, build the house exactly all at one level. You've got to basically do it vertically. So as you're doing it vertically, having that elevator, critical. And it could be designed to have it put in later, so you don't necessarily have to have that upfront cost. But then as you're considering to stay aging in place for the rest of your life, the cost of that elevator is going to be nothing if you were going to be moving into an assisted living type community. So something to consider.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right. Well,
thank you, John.
Yeah. Thank you, Hilary. We'd love to help you out, help you think through these criteria that we've given you. I think it's a major life choice. And so we're here to help you think it through. And please reach out to us if we can answer any questions for you all.
Absolutely. And share this video with your spouse, partner, have these conversations, start thinking early. We commend you on doing all this research, and we hope it was helpful. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you.